Hi everyone, it's Tamari the Astro Fashionista, and I'm coming to you with a different type of video today. I'm in my leopard print. It doesn't even match what I'm wearing, but I just threw it on from the coat closet because I am doing the natal chart in astrology of Joe Exotic from Tiger King. And I'm assuming if you're watching this, you probably know what Tiger King is. And for those of you who don't know, it's a Netflix show that kind of follows the chronicles of the secret life of like zoo owners. Um, I guess like the underground world of like people that own exotic animals and particularly tigers and lions. And by far the star of the show is Joe Exotic. And I just got to pull up a picture of him. I'm going to share my screen really quick just so you guys can see what I'm looking at. This is Joe Exotic. I pulled up his Wikipedia page. Let me go to the Google images. So here you go. This is the guy we're talking about today. But anyway, I just thought this would be really funny because first of all, it like starts off about something. You're like, what am I watching? It's Side note, my husband and I got pizza the day that I decided to watch it. It's like my favorite pizza. And I'm a person that's like really sensitive to like eating and watching things that are like nasty or disturbing. Like I'm bound to throw up. That I've always been like that. So like when I started eating my favorite pizza and watching Tiger King, I was like, why would I choose to eat and watch this at the same time? The first episode, first of all, is crazy because you're just like shocked by what's going on. You're seeing animals being abused, which is horrible. You're seeing like these people that like live obviously off the beaten path, like the secret life you've never heard about. And it's just like it's kind of disturbing, the first episode, at least to me it was. So I was just like in shock. But then once you like get through the first episode and you keep watching, it's like you'll be hooked. Like I totally understand why people are obsessed with it. But it just turns into a murder mystery. So it's just like a circus and a train wreck that you start watching and you just can't stop. So that's all, the only way I can explain it. And pretty much all of America thinks the same because it's like one of the number one watched shows on Netflix. But anyway, Joe Exotic, I just took a couple of notes. So he ran the Greater Wynwood Exotic Animal Park in Oklahoma. And the guy was like really just very interesting character. So the first thing I did obviously was look up his birthday, and I was like, we probably don't have a birth time, but someone did post his birth time, and it has a Rodden rating of A, and that's like an astrological way that we rate like the quality of the birth information, like if it can be accurate. So it has an A, so that means it should be pretty accurate. And I am going to pull up his chart and just kind of like casually talk about some of the stuff that jumps out at me and like why I think he kind of like ended up doing what he did and then like ultimately went to jail, went to prison. And maybe we'll pull up his biography, or not biography, but whatever, it's not autobiography, his biography. Which it's just a really short one on Wikipedia. It's not even like a biography.com or anything like that. So I'm going to share my screen because I want you guys to see the natal chart as I talk through it. So let me share. Okay, and I'll keep his face here. This is inspiration. Okay, so first off, the first thing I notice about this chart is, as you can see, there's like planets here. Oh, and just as a disclaimer, I'm using whole sign houses for those of you who are familiar with astrology and you rechart yourself. Because I use a lot of ancient techniques, I'm going to be using whole sign houses for this reading, and it seems to match. I did run Placidus too, but it all makes sense. So if you notice, there's planets here at the top of the chart, and there's planets here at the bottom. And so in astrology, this is actually considered the eastern part of the chart, and this is considered the western part of the chart. I won't get into all the technicalities as to why. And then this is the area below the horizon, and this is above the horizon. So anytime you have a lot of planets like above the horizon, usually that's someone who is a little bit more comfortable being in the spotlight or being outgoing or having their life seen in some way. There are exceptions, but this is kind of like a general thing. But as you notice, he also has just as many planets, and if anything, he has more personal planets in the lower hemisphere in the second quadrant. These are in the fourth quadrant. So that tells me a lot of his life. First of all, because he has this opposing balance, there is Neptune here. And technically this chart type is called a tripod, but he kind of is living in between two worlds of like being inward, even though a lot of his actions are still influenced by other people because it's in the second, he has planets on the second quadrant. But he has like a little bit of like inward work that he's come here to do, even though some of his life is being lived out in the spotlight, especially with that north node in the 10th house, and his moon is in the 10th house at the top of his chart, which we'll get to. So this guy is someone who is, battles a lot of like, goes back and forth between a lot of different things in general. He was born in the evening. So the birthday we have is March 5th, 1963, and he was born at 9:14 p.m. So he has a night chart. So the sect of his chart is night. So with sect, if your sun is below the horizon, that's a night chart. If the sun is above the horizon, it's a day chart. He clearly has a night chart. He was born at 9 in the evening. So his sun is in the bottom half of the chart. So that means that Saturn in his chart, which is here, Saturn ruling hard lessons and restriction and rules and regulations, is going to be the greater malefic. It's going to give him the most problems in his life. Saturn would. And Mars being another malefic, it's cooled off a little bit, even though it's at the top of the chart, it's visible. It's cooled off a little bit, but it doesn't seem like it based on the way he acts. It's cooled off a little bit because he was born in the evening. And then also Venus, being of the nighttime sect in astrology, is going to be the greater benefic in his chart. So he will get the most blessings from the planet Venus in his life. And Jupiter is the other benefic. Doesn't mean he won't get helped by Jupiter, but the Venus will be more beneficial to him overall. Now, the interesting thing is he is a Libra rising, and Venus rules Libra. So Venus is actually the ruler of his entire chart. And so the planet that is the most beneficial in his life is also his chart ruler. And this is important because it kind of tells us that partnership, harmony, love are super important to his identity. That's going to kind of drive him. Libra risings usually are people that are charming. It doesn't always guarantee attractiveness, because I'll let you be the judge of whether you think Joe Exotic is a looker or not. But it does guarantee like a level of charm to your personality. And when you look at this documentary, you're like, I don't even know if it's a documentary, but you look at this show, it's like he looks crazy, but people followed him. Like he had a following. He not only had an internet show, he was filming a reality show. He had multiple lovers, which we'll get to. The guy was charming, and you cannot deny that. And I think that is definitely that Libra rising. There's even a part where he's like getting ready for a date, and he's like, "Oh, my curls, my charm," or whatever. And you know what I mean? So it's like that's that Venus standing out in his chart. So love, partnership, all of that is super important to his well-being. Sorry, I just want to make sure I'm recording. So yes. Then let's talk about some of he doesn't have a soul dispositor, which I won't get into, but a lot of the planets in his chart are reporting to Saturn. So I look at so without getting too technical, looking at if he has a sole dispositor in his chart or what planets are dispositing on the other planets. There's a lot of planets that we have to report to, quote unquote, Saturn. Like I said, that's already the planet that's going to be the most difficult, troubling for him in his chart. So Mercury reports to him, to Saturn, Venus, Mars, Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune, even though those last three are outer planets. So that's like an initial first impression. Now, when we look at the elements in his chart and like what's the strongest elements, I do my own table here on my note. I have like a little note worksheet that I do, but even on my software, it shows you he has strong water. And you can see that because he's a Pisces sun, he has Chiron in Pisces, even though you wouldn't count that typically. He has Jupiter in Pisces. He has the moon in Cancer. He has the North Node in Cancer, not a planet point, excuse me. He has Neptune in Scorpio. So he has a lot of water energy, and also his sun and his moon, the two luminaries, are in water signs. So this is an emotional personality we're dealing with. When you have a lot of water in your chart, it can give you a tendency to really act out of emotions, to make decisions that are emotionally charged, to not really sit and think, which would be more of the air quality, which he is. No, he has five. He has a lot of air. It says 5 planets in air. So let's see. He has Venus in Aquarius. He has Saturn in Aquarius. Libra ascendant. Okay, so, but I'll tell you why where that air comes out. It didn't come out in his decision making. At least that's not what I think. The groundedness is missing. He is lacking earth in his chart. Yeah, so what earth? He has, it says 2, so he only has 2 outer planets, Uranus and Pluto in Virgo. So there's not a lot of groundedness there. So there's just emotion. He's an emotional guy. And if you watch the show, you see that he's always riled up. He's always like, if he's not smiling, he's upset about something. And he just really acts out of emotion. So that made a lot of sense when I saw that. He has some strong planets playing out in his chart. And I say that because he has 3 planets that are actually at home or in rulership. So in his chart, he has the moon. The moon is in Cancer. The moon rules Cancer. He has Pisces in Jupiter, or Jupiter in Pisces. And I'm talking traditional astrology now. I know I usually mix traditional and modern, but Jupiter rules Pisces traditionally. Neptune is the modern ruler. And then he has Saturn in Aquarius, and Saturn is the traditional ruler of Aquarius and Capricorn. So when you have a planet in its own sign, it's able to perform a little better, or it's going to, I don't even want to say better, it's going to perform in the most purest form, whether that's good or not. So it's almost like and you have to take a lot of other things into account, like what aspects are being made to those planets and all of that. But for the most part, it's almost like you being at your house, you're comfortable in your own home, right? If that planet was not in that sign, it wouldn't be as comfortable as it could be. So that's the easiest way to explain that. So moving on to his sun. So this is like a very interesting part when I started looking into the chart deeply. So he has this sun here. This is the symbol for the sun here in Pisces. So the sun is a hot and dry planet. And we refer to planets, the moon and the sun in astrology, as planets, knowing they're not planets, but they're considered one of the 10 planets. So the sun is actually in an element that is a water sign. It's a water sign, not a element. Pisces is a water sign. So that's putting the hot sun into mutable water, right? And the sun is our vitality. It's like our drive. Well, drive would be Mars, but the sun is more of like passion, from a creative standpoint, it's what kind of gets us going. It's our interests, our likes and our dislikes. It's our general demeanor. And the sun in Pisces is someone that is creative, emotional, a dreamer, kind of not as assertive as, say, the sun in Aries would be, where it's exalted. Whereas that can be very direct and to the point. A Pisces sun would actually be a little bit more passive aggressive, if that's probably the best word I can think of right now. And I know he seems like a strong personality, which we'll be able to see as well. But we're dealing with someone who's actually kind of a gentle soul on the inside, you know. He wasn't born probably being a fighter. He had to learn how to fight. And so one of the reasons that is, well, for one, this little symbol here, this is Chiron, this is an asteroid, is sitting within 4 degrees of the sun. That's called a conjunction. And that is, Chiron is the wounded healer in the chart. It's kind of where you are hurt and have pain, but you can heal people from it later on if you learn to embrace the tragedy and turn it into triumph. So interesting enough, the sun rules the father in the chart a lot of the times. Usually, like, when you want to see what kind of childhood someone had, you can look either at the midheaven, what the rulers are, the IC and the MC. You can look at the sun and the moon, the relationship between. There's several different ways, but traditionally, the sun can represent the father. And so I thought this was interesting when you look at this Chiron, because one of the first things that he mentions is that his father and him had a strange relationship when his father found out he was homosexual. And I think one of the things his dad said to him was like, don't show up to my funeral, or something very painful like that. That obviously, if you heard that, you would be, you feel you're disowned, like your own parent does not support you. So that sun is part of your ego. It's your will. So he has a wounded ego, and this is clearly played out throughout the show, because he's constantly needing to like get attention and be seen and be noticed and recognized, because he didn't feel recognized as a child. And so that clearly stood out. And then Saturn is the ruler of the 4th again. In the 4th, this is like the home and family life. Not going to jump into that right now, but so like he had a tough childhood, or at least from his perspective, it was tough. Now, another thing that is interesting. So he has Chiron in the 6th house. He has the sun in the 6th house. He has Jupiter in the 6th house. The 6th house rules health. It rules work, service. It rules pets. So the fact that he had a million pets is no coincidence. Yes, it wasn't a dog. Or did he have dogs at first? Or maybe it was someone else I'm thinking of but he probably has had dogs, but he had a lot of pets. So I'll come back. No, I'll explain that now. So when you think about the sun, it being your identity and what you get, what lights you up sometimes. He got his identity from work, from pets, and from routine. And the 6th house also rules routine, daily routine. So when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense that sun is sitting there, because his work as a zookeeper, as an animal collector, as an entertainer became a part of his identity. And that's the way he was able to really kind of work on those childhood wounds, was by moving and putting that energy into another place and putting it into animals, and 6th house animals. So I thought that was very interesting. Another thing that's interesting is that the 6th house, again, I said it rules health. And at first I was like, he didn't have health problems. And then I thought, A, we don't know because they didn't talk about it, but B, he mentioned he had a bad accident because he tried to commit suicide. So he tried to, and this is where it gets really deep, y'all, because for one, the sun is sitting across from Pluto here. and Pluto's in the 12th house. And Pluto is the planet of death. It's a planet of transformation. It's a planet of power. It's upheaval. It's revolution. It's big dramatic change. Uranus would be swift change. Pluto can be slow, deep, dramatic change. And that Pluto is sitting directly opposite his sun in the 12th house of subconscious things that are hidden. So this guy had a lot of deep rooted issues and passions that he was keeping secret from the world. And that partly manifested when he tried to commit suicide and run his car off of a bridge or a hill, I think, or something like that. And so he was injured. And I think he moved away. I think he moved to Florida or Oklahoma, and he actually healed. He lived somewhere and he started healing with the animals. So I think that's actually when he really got into like more exotic animals, hence the name Joe Exotic. So he did have a health problem. That's the only one I know of, just from watching the show. And it doesn't mention it in his biography, but that was really interesting. And it was the cause of his father in this wound that drove him to do that. So that Chiron sitting right next to the sun, opposite Pluto, bam, you get someone doing something dramatic and then getting injured from it. He also struggles with power because Pluto is power. So when you have an opposition, you have one planet in a sign that is opposite another planet in its opposite sign. So Virgo and Pluto are opposites, and you can have out of sign oppositions too, but Pisces, I said Pluto, sorry, I meant Pisces and Virgo are opposite signs. And his Chiron, the Chiron is directly opposite Pluto because they're both at 10 degrees. And then the sun is also opposite Pluto in Virgo. So it's the balancing of these two different energies. When you think of Pisces, it's mutable water. So it's something that can't be contained, somebody that's creative and someone that doesn't like boundaries and blurs the lines a lot and emotional. And then you have Virgo, which is mutable earth. And it's about actually putting some practicality into change. So they're very different energies. So he's trying to balance, he's living out this imbalance in his life. And it's something that when you have a chart, it's something that you struggle. I don't want to say struggle, but it's something that lives with you throughout your life. And then you just learn how to adjust to your chart. But clearly when he was a child, that imbalance was really, really hard for him. Another thing is his sun. So let's talk about some of the good stuff with his sun. So his sun is actually making what's called a trine. So you see the sun's at 14 degrees and Neptune in the second house is at 15 degrees in Scorpio. Scorpio and Pisces are both water signs. One is fixed water, one is mutable water, but they're making what's called a trine or a harmonious aspect to each other. So when Neptune and the sun team up, that's extreme creativity. Neptune is the higher octave of Venus. It's a planet of illusion and disillusionment, which we can see it's in his second house of finances, and he definitely had financial issues. And he couldn't seem to get a grip on them, but he also made a lot of money. We can tell, they didn't tell you how much money he made, but he also made a lot of money financially through his creative ideas. Whether we think they're crazy or not, he had a lot of great ideas for this little business that he had, which actually grew to be known. And he had, I think he had millions of, I don't know if it was millions of followers, thousands of followers. And he was able to monetize on that. So that sun positive aspect to the Neptune actually helped him a lot in his career. Let's see if there's anything else. I also want to mention that the sun here, so not only the sun is being deposited on by Jupiter because it's in Pisces. So like I said, Jupiter is not the most beneficial in his chart, but it is Jupiter is still beneficial wherever it is usually. It's also in Pisces in the sign that it rules, so it's getting strength there. It's in the sixth house of work and career and health. So obviously he was able to heal from his accident, but also he was able to grow his business. Jupiter growth. Jupiter expands things. He was able to grow that business. And then the sun is the ruler of the 11th house. And the 11th house is the money that you make from your career or destiny. It's also rules groups of people, large groups of people. His sun, his personality was used to entertain people. And Leo is a sign of entertainment and it rules his 11th house. So that I'm like, oh yeah, it makes sense why he was not only a zookeeper, I don't even know what the correct term is, but he was an entertainer to large groups of people. So that sun actually works. He was able to turn some of the difficult aspects with his sun in that opposition from Pluto into positivity or into positive things in his life as well. So let's move on to the moon sign. So look at his moon. So we talked about his rising sign, we talked about his sun, let's talk about the moon. So this moon here is in Cancer. And when I was dissecting the moon, I was like, oh, wow, this is really getting interesting. So the moon in your chart is like, it's how you are emotionally. It's your emotional needs and desires. It could be how you were nurtured. And who knows? I don't know. Maybe his mother was really nurturing. The moon doesn't always directly equate to the mother, but it could be. To me, when I look at the Cancer and Capricorn here and the ruler Saturn and the moon, I think what I'm getting is that his father was the cold Saturnian type and his mother was the nurturing type, which I think his mom ended up being in some of the later footage that he had, if I can remember. So I think the mom was probably maybe more nurturing to him, that Cancer, and he himself was nurturing. So he had a Cancer moon. He was nurturing. He was a nurturer, like he liked giving nurture, but he also was important for him to receive nurture. And I think this really played out with him becoming a nurturer to animals. And so like, even though there's a lot of things in the media and for the most part, we all look at this show as something negative because it shines this light on like, it's like this circus and people are like, well, what about the animals? They're being treated so badly. Like it really is sad when you think about it and when you watch it. But he really started out loving the animals. So I think the animals really became like his children. And so I think he ended up being nurturing and expressing his love and expressing his nurturing side as a zookeeper or whatever you call it. And the moon is in the 10th house of career. So where sixth house is like everyday work and routine, the 10th house is more of like a career position. And like, if it's not your career, it's like, it could be a way you're seen in the world, but usually is your career and status. And so he had a career that was of the moon, of the essence of the moon, nurturing, taking care of animals. That moon also, and just to mention the moon, Cancer is cardinal water. So even though it's water and it's emotional, it's knowing how to put action and get things done and start things because it's cardinal energy. So he was able to start this business that no one would ever think of with that cardinal energy, and become like a nurturing figure to these animals. And the Cancer is also the ruler of the 10th house. So the moon, the ruler of the 10th, is actually in the 10th. So that really double emphasizes that. And his midheaven is Cancer as well. And his north node, another destiny point, is in Cancer. So either way, he was going to be in a career that required nurturing of some sort and taking care of things, and it could have been cooking. The other way this plays out sometimes is things that have to do with Cancer, home, like if you're in real estate or you're a chef or you're good with finances and money, like those are other kind of ways a midheaven and Cancer can play out. But for him, it was animals. And so another thing that was interesting is that the moon is making this opposition to Venus down here. And you know what? I'm going to come back to that because I'm going to do a whole thing about his relationships in a second. Let's talk more about why people were attracted to him even more. So remember I said the Saturn is here, kind of difficult. It could be a difficult thing in his life. So he has Saturn in the 5th house. The 5th house rules, I mean, he has 3 planets in the 5th house, not only Saturn, but Mercury and Venus too. And the 5th house rules creativity, it rules children, it rules games, it rules gambling, and entertainment. And so he clearly was an entertainer. The Saturn actually helped him in some ways, because that Saturn is making a positive aspect to his ascendant, his rising sign. And the Saturn's at 17 degrees, the rising sign, ascendant 7 is 16 degrees. So it's a 1-degree orb. So people actually took him serious because Saturn is, and Saturn is actually in Aquarius, the other sign it rules besides Capricorn. Aquarius is a humanitarian sign. It's about reaching a lot of people. It's about being eclectic and different, and that's more of like the modern assignment of Aquarius, the whole idea of being different, because Uranus is its modern ruler, but it's about people. And so I think people saw him as someone that could be trusted, and someone who they saw as serious, even though us as a third party, the audience watching him, you're like, who's taking this guy serious? I think a lot of people actually that got to know him took him serious. And I think that Saturn actually helped him, because your ascendant is your appearance. It's you, it's what you're presenting. It's your outer presence. So that Libra charm, and it just helped him overall. And another thing, people saw him, I think, as a business person. Saturn can be business. And I think they saw him as a father figure. And he didn't have children of his own, not that we know of. But Saturn here, I think that people that worked for him, his employees, and the 6th house can be employees too. And Jupiter, Pisces is, Jupiter is the ruler of the 6th, and it's in the 6th. So he had a good relationship with his employees. I think that Jupiter helps him. But I think a lot of them looked at him as a father figure. And I think his lovers, with an S, also looked at him as a father figure. And I think that's that Saturn making that trine to his ascendant, which is helping, because Saturn can also rule fathers and father type characters in a chart. We talked about, another reason why he was super creative, not only is that Neptune making that positive aspect to the sun, it's also making a positive aspect to his midheaven as well. So his midheaven's at 19 degrees, and Neptune is at 15 degrees. So that's a pretty tight orb. So using his creativity, so it really is kind of a grand trine that he has going on with his career. So he did have some good things happening for him. Okay, so let's talk about his relationships. So this was, I think, one of the most entertaining parts of watching this show, was watching his relationships play out on the screen. So he had one husband that we knew of at first. I don't know the guy's name, but it's a guy with no teeth, and but he got his teeth fixed now. So he had that husband. I think his name started with a J too. And then there's this guy Travis that comes, and he gets charmed by him, and he wanted to be married to Travis too. So they had a 3-way wedding, I believe, or maybe him and the other guy were married at first and they had another wedding. I can't remember, but he ended up being in a polygamous type of homosexual relationship with these 2 younger men. And the first thing that stands out to me is that Venus in Aquarius. So Venus, remember, Venus is the ruler of his chart. as a Libra rising, Venus in Aquarius is different. And so not only is Saturn dispositing on Venus because Saturn rules Aquarius, um, but the traditional ruler is Uranus. So Uranus as well. So first of all, he was much older than these people, than everyone he dated. So that's the Saturn dispositing on the Venus, him coming across as an older partner to people. Then the Venus is in Aquarius, which rules eccentric, different. Usually people with Venus in Aquarius either are attracted to partners that are different, they have a relation, or they like relationships that are different, they themselves are different in relationships. There's some sort of quirk or eclecticness about how they are in love relationships. And so he was polygamous. And so there you go. That kind of jumped off the chart when I looked at that. So and so another thing is that I think I already talked about him kind of being like a father to his children. Yes. That Venus is sitting opposite Mars. And here Mars is in the 11th house. So I don't know if this played out. I think this did play out in his relationships. I want to say, I don't know if they mentioned that he fought with his partners. I'm not really sure, but I would almost bet that they had some fights. Him and Travis and the other guy, I am sure they fought because that Venus is actually sitting right opposite from Mars, the planet of aggression and anger. But it doesn't matter if he fought with them, he fought with other people. And remember, Venus is the ruler of his chart. So he was a guy that was constantly, and I can't believe I haven't mentioned Carol Baskin this whole video. The whole thing was about this fight with Carol Baskin, who ironically also has Mars in Leo when I looked up her chart without a birth time. But this guy was a fighter. So that Mars, even though he was, kind of like, don't take all that water for weakness, or that he was a sensitive guy that was a nurturer with that Cancer moon, he was a fighter. And I think that played out a lot in the Venus and the Mars opposition. And then you mix that with the fact that he's an emotional guy already with all this water. It was like he was a ticking time bomb. And so like, it's just funny because he's like, I feel like watching it, he's either smiling or laughing or joking, or he's like mad and revved up. Like you rarely see like an in-between representation. And clearly, obviously, this was like an edited version of his life. We don't know how he was all the time, but you get the sense that he was a person that was like really extreme. And that's going back to these whole planets being on opposite ends of the spectrum with each other. So I also thought that was interesting. So yeah, he was a fighter, and the big fight was him and Carol Baskin. Now, where I think he got into trouble, there are a couple things that I think. So the 12th house rules, it's one of the most misunderstood houses in astrology because it rules subconscious, it rules things that are hidden, it could be hidden enemies, it could be far away places, it can mean isolation. So hospitals and prison are actually ruled by the 12th house. So he has both Pluto and Uranus there. So that already, and I don't want to scare anyone. I don't want you to, in my Placidus chart, I have Pluto in the 12th. Because it can also give you more of like a psychic energy or someone that's very intuitive, which I'm sure he was, to be honest. And I think that is the reason why he was so paranoid, is because he probably did. First of all, I totally think Carol killed her husband. And I think he knows that she killed him. And I mean, it doesn't take psychic powers to know that, but I think for him, he was really intuitive. You have to be when you have the moon in Cancer, you have, the sun in Pisces, like those two alone, I would say give him a little bit of psychic energy. But then he also has Pluto and Uranus in that 12th house. The guy was intuitive because Uranus is also flashes of inspiration. And he has Mercury in Aquarius, which we haven't talked about yet. But so this was a guy that I think he felt a lot. He knew when what people were trying to do. I think he was aware when people were either trying to like play him or take advantage of him. And so I think that probably fed into a lot of the emotion and anxiety he experienced in life. But going back to the whole Pluto Uranus thing. So I think the problem that I think he made without knowing him or anything is not channeling that energy into something more productive, like healing work. Yes, he helped heal animals, and I think that was, he also killed animals according to what we saw, which was totally wrong. So I think, again, that opposition playing out, not knowing whether to be of the light or of the dark, really got the best of him. So that was it's not a surprise to me that he would clearly end up in prison over what he did in terms of the animal abuse. Because I think when he got convicted, it was of killing the tigers and like burying their bones or something on his property, or them finding it. And I forgot the other thing that he was arrested for. But anyway, so let's look at this Mercury here. So this Mercury is in Aquarius, and Mercury in Aquarius is, I say that's a very strong position. Some astrologers even think that Mercury is exalted, meaning of high esteem in Aquarius, although it's exalted in Virgo, this other sign that it rules. So I would say Mercury in Aquarius is a very strong position. It's someone that is very good with words, someone that can charm, or not even charm, but move people with their words. Aquarius being an air sign, of being a sign about humanity, the water bearer, being able to give speeches. I mean, he was a performer. Let's not forget that. I mean, the guy was a country music star, but I read that he didn't like write any of his songs himself or perform them, which is funny because I feel like that's that Neptune, that deception part of Neptune to the sun, like being able to pull a veil over people's eyes, even though it wasn't you singing. But then he ran for governor, he ran for president. Like, I mean, the guy had a way with words. We can't deny that. And he was quick-witted. But moving back, because I wrote all these notes about how I saw this Mercury playing out in his chart, and I just want to make sure that I get everything. And of course, I can't find it right now. Let's see. I think I'm missing a page of my notes. Okay, so basically, Mercury is in Aquarius. And Aquarius, Mercury is the ruler of the 9th and the 12th house. When you think about the reason why, or one of the reasons why he got himself into a lot of trouble was his words. It was all the things that he was doing. Oh, duh, the reason why he got arrested, I can't believe I let this out, was trying to kill Carol Baskin. So when you think about what got him into trouble, it was what he was always talking about, which was Carol. He literally was obsessed with Carol, like beyond, like when you watch it, like that's all he talked about. Well, apparently, like when he was being filmed, like he was doing internet shows about her. He made a music video about her. He like wished her dead several times publicly. And so that Mercury and that Saturn dispositing on that Mercury, Saturn, remember I said this was going to be the planet that was most difficult in his chart, or one of the most difficult things in his chart, was he was not acting ethically, and he was just like running amok and saying anything that he wanted to say. And Saturn does not operate like that. Saturn is by the rules, by the book. You can't cut corners with Saturn. You can't be deceptive with Saturn. You can't just say what you want. You just really have to be by the book. And I think if he would have followed those rules a little more and not been so emotional with all that water, things would not have probably played out the way they did. But because he flew off the handle threatening Carol and then literally hired someone to kill her, he went to jail. And that is just very clearly seen here. Another thing that I want to mention is that Mercury is in mutual reception with Uranus in the 12th house. And even though that's Uranus being a modern ruler, I'm still counting that mutual reception. We have Uranus in Virgo, and Mercury rules Virgo, and you have Mercury in Aquarius, and Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius. So that's called a mutual reception. So when you have a mutual reception in the chart, those two planets and those where they are, those two houses, they are tied up together. So for him, that's the 5th house. That's his entertainment. That's the way he entertains. That's children. Let's call it his employees, because his employees ended up being more like his children. And creativity. So the way he entertained is tied up with the 12th house, which I mentioned was prison and isolation and being away and far away places. So ultimately, I feel like that played a part in him going to prison. That Mercury and that mutual reception Uranus, it happened really fast and really quickly. And it's a pretty wide orb with Pluto, but Pluto is there, and it's that opposite to the sun. So him being in the media, I guess it was media, but him putting himself out there, his son, the way he presents himself, and really threatening Carol multiple times, talking about Carol all the time, was the reason ultimately why he went to prison. Because if he wasn't doing all of those things and nobody really knew who he was, I mean, can we say that he would have been in this position? I don't think so. So I think that really, I thought that was interesting when I was trying to look, okay, where's the prison part? Where's the being locked up in isolation? Because you can't say Pluto in the 12th is that, but like when you look at the whole picture together and you watch the story, it all makes sense. So I think I hit on most of the points. Let me just make sure there's nothing that I missed out on or that I left out. One thing that I thought was interesting was the opposition of the moon and Venus. So the moon is all about security, right? It's your security blanket. And it being in Cancer, it's someone that wants security and wants to be nurtured and wants probably most likely partnership. And I forgot to put out that partnership was really important to him, obviously, because he was a Libra ascendant. Love relationships were important to him with that 5th house and Venus being in the 5th house. So the guy was a romantic. But with that opposition between the moon and Venus, it's almost like he wanted the freedom, which is the Venus in Aquarius, in relationships, but he also wanted the security. So that's why he ultimately ended up in a polygamous relationship, because he wanted to have his cake and eat it too. He needed both. He needed that. And even when Travis killed himself, which was so sad and tragic that happened to that young man, he immediately got another partner. And like it was something that he actually needed. Like he needed that, even if it was a false sense, he needed that security. And even I think the partner, I don't know this guy's name either, but now that he's in prison, he was saying that Joe calls him all the time and like they just talk about the same thing because he's paranoid. And I think he's just paranoid of not having that security blanket. So that was another interesting thing that I noticed in his chart. So I had thought about doing a comparison with Carol's chart, but I think that's just going to be too long and too much. But like I said, let me just pull up her chart really quick just for shits and giggles, because they weren't born that far apart from each other. Carol was born in 1961 and Joe was born in 63. So Carol's only a couple of years older than him. But she's a Gemini. That's just for you guys that are wondering. But I thought it was interesting that they both had Mars and Leo being literally a cat and a lion, and where they're putting their energy into. And like I said, I don't have Carol's birth time, so I just did use noon. But I thought that was interesting that they both had Mars and Leo. And then interesting, her moon is in Pisces. So her moon is literally at the same degree as Joe's moon in Cancer. So their moons would be trine. So in theory, emotionally, they probably would get along if they weren't enemies. And I think it's ironic that they both have these moon signs and water signs, you know, emotion, taking care of things, even though Cancer is more of the caretaker, but her moon is also in a water sign. So she's also emotional and has an emotional nature. But then when I looked at, there was one thing I noticed that was totally off. Oh yeah, her Venus is in Taurus at 0 degrees and his Venus is in Aquarius at 1 degree. So it's a 1 degree orb, and their Venuses are square each other. So they would not like each other. They wouldn't have made, I mean, it doesn't always work that way in synastry. And again, I'm just taking 2 points, but I just think it's funny that they have that compatibility with the moon. So it's like that passion in the moon and the drive and getting all worked up about each other. But then there's this tension between their Venus signs and their and I'm doing this because it's a square aspect. It's a 90-degree aspect when there's tension in astrology. So when you think about it, it's like you can't move forward and their Venuses are like doing this to each other. So I thought that was interesting. But anyway, I think that's enough Joe Exotic talk at the moment for me. I hope you guys enjoyed this, especially those of you who like the astrology part. I hope I wasn't rambling too much. I just did what I did and made some notes and decided to record this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe and give me a thumbs up if you guys want to see more videos like this of like celebrities, or even if you want to see, I don't know, just let me know what you want to see. If you want to see more like chart breakdowns of celebrities and things like that, happy to do that stuff. It's actually really interesting, especially when you have someone's biography to kind of like validate the astrology. So thank you for watching, and I hope you guys are enjoying your time on quarantine. I will see you later.